PBS Kids animation and spooky, two things that doesn't seem to mix well. Or do they? Arthur is the OG PBS Kids show of all time. And there are some episodes that are spooky and actually have scarred me since I was a child. Never thought I'd say a sentence like that. So why not relive the trauma by ranking all the spooky Arthur and Halloween episodes? I'm going to solely focus on whole episodes. In my research, there were a lot of people who have like one-offs, you know, like one scene, maybe for example, eating broccoli or something like that. Those are one-offs that like are imaginary and are like last 5 seconds. I'm talking about the whole episode. Anyways, here's number 6.
Trick or treat.
So this episode opens up about Arthur monologuing about how Halloween is about scaring people with their costumes. He puts on his potential costume, which is like a Frankenstein dentist combo, and tries to scare DW. And DW absolutely roasts the shit out of him.
Is that your idea of scary? What's on your face? Underpants?
Like, oh my god, I've missed Arthur humor. It's so funny. After the opening, we cut to Francine, Buster, Brain, and Arthur basically coming up with their costumes. And Brain actually has something.
I'm going as the 14th century. This is the castle, and these are the serfs. And here's a village where false beliefs are taking hold. No hygiene? No movable type? No science?
Like, he makes a good point. I would absolutely die if I was in the medieval times. So a little later, we're in Arthur's like kitchen with DW, and DW just keeps on hiccuping, and everyone is absolutely annoyed. So Arthur comes with the bright idea to scare DW to get rid of her hiccups. First scare doesn't happen. So DW comes up with a list of things that scares her, and they go through the whole list. Something kind of works, but the hiccups aren't completely gone, and they come back. She basically thinks that she's gonna have the hiccups forever. Cut to later, all the kids are dressing up and everyone is making fun of Arthur's costume, saying how it's not scary. All the kids go down to the door, about to ready to trick or treat, but then the lights go out. Arthur comes in while DW is coming into the room, and for some reason at a different angle, DW gets so scared of Arthur's costume that she gets rid of her hiccups. Trick of the light, I don't know, but that's how the episode ends. I'm giving this episode 0 green potato chips out of 10. Because it's just not spooky. It's very like Halloween kind of, but it doesn't even get me in the Halloween spirit. That's why it's ranked so low.
Arthur and the Haunted Treehouse.
This is one of the newer episodes that I just completely stopped watching PBS off of. I think it came out in 2017. I was already graduating college when this episode was coming out. But I want to point out that this episode is the longest episode out of all of the rankings. Like, it's an hour long. Anyways, there's a new character named LaDonna that's new to the show. I guess she's been in the show for a bit. I just stopped watching it, so it's new to me. LaDonna tells her story and the kids are scared, and Arthur tells about how the treehouse is actually haunted. The reason why Arthur thinks that the treehouse is haunted is because he found an old looking doll, which is terrifying, honestly. Like, Jesus Christ. He tells about how he heard a voice coming from the treehouse, and he says that he buried it somewhere. I guess the last Halloween special was the Hick or Treat, because these costumes look vaguely familiar. Then it's Francine's turn to tell about her spooky encounter. She was basically trick-or-treating at her apartment complex and meets with a new neighbor. The new neighbor tells of a scary story of like when she was younger, and honestly, I'm sorry, the monster looks like a giant turd, but we're gonna pretend like it's scary. Anyways, story ends. She gets her candy, she leaves, but finds out she accidentally took something of the lady, and then goes back, knocks on the door, and oh wow, who is this person? The guy gets the photo from Francine and finds out that this person was missing, which was his sister. Woo! Binky shows up to the treehouse and tells about how he was about to TP Mr. Ratburn's place. Binky enters Mr. Ratburn's haunted house, and it's a little spooky. I hate dolls and puppets. It was also giving Twin Peaks. Like, it was very eerie. Basically, the haunted house scares Binky and he runs out. But while all this is going on, they're telling their scary stories, they're all waiting for Muffy, and Muffy calls in and we get a perspective of her going to the treehouse where she gets stuck actually with Bailey. Bailey and Muffy get stuck in the cemetery. Bailey is like completely scared of the cemetery, but Muffy isn't, but they get caught in the rain and are inside of like some tombstone thing, and they hear a scary sound. Ooh. So we get to the second part of the special, and this is where it kind of just stops being scary. Turns out all those scary things were either pranks or just a misunderstanding. Arthur's doll story was actually a prank by DW and LaDonna. DW wasn't invited to the sleepover because Arthur thought she would be too scared, and LaDonna just wanted to do it because shits and giggles. I actually like her, she's funny. We find out that Muffy and Bailey found a cat and they return the cat to the owners, and we find out that the old people that Francine was like talking to, they were pranking her. And what's funny is that they actually dressed like the giant turd bunny. It's so funny. Arthur finds out that they were all being pranked and they pranked each other back, and yeah, yada yada yada. I give this episode 2 Dracula rat burns out of 10. Maybe short form content has completely ruined my attention span, but this episode just kind of dragged along too much. And the animation kind of took me out of it because it kind of reminded me of like the old Arthur, like point and click games. There were spooks. I mean, the doll looked terrifying. I don't know, everything was resolved at the end. And some of these episodes that I'm going to be ranking kind of keep the paranormaling. That doesn't sound like a word, but yeah, you get what I mean? Like, you want to be spooked even after the episode.
Prunella and the haunted locker.
So the opening is a skit about like fears and stuff with DW, Buster, and Prunella. And DW and Buster are like super scared and they get over their fears. But Prunella is scared of a locker and she does not get over her fear. And then we cut to Prunella going into school where her locker is not there and she's moved to a temporary one, locker 237. And Fern, I love you. Oh my God, Fern. Fern is like a storyteller and her favorite genres are detective and horror stories. So Fern, being Fern, tells this story about Jack Murphy, who was in that exact locker, about how it smelled bad and how it gave him bad luck. And basically, like, all the visuals are just kind of spooky, especially the last scene where Fern says that Jack Murphy just simply disappeared. Since everyone in the school knows that Fern likes to tell her stories, Prunella just like tells her like, ha ha ha, good story, blah blah blah. She goes to the locker and she starts to smell something really bad. And then she hears a voice. And throughout the day, she starts to get bad luck. Her like project basically gets destroyed. So she starts to like get paranoid and think that like, oh man, maybe this is happening. And then she tells like all her friends, and Brain being Brain was like, nah, be real. Don't be dumb. So Francine kind of confirms that there was a student who attended there who was called Jay Mulberry, which kind of sounds like Jack Murphy. Prunella is like, oh man, this is getting real. Later in the night, Prunella has a dream that the locker comes to life and like destroys her project and starts to like attack her, and she wakes up in a fright. Then she comes into school, faces her fears, finds out that there's a vent behind the locker, and it turns out it's a vent towards the kitchen. And at the end, Prunella goes up to Fern saying, you lied, didn't you? And she's like, yeah, I did. And they all have a big laugh. But what I love about this episode is that when everyone leaves like the little swings that they're at, the swing starts to move, and then there is a laughter. That's spooky. That's spooky. I like that. I give this episode 3 firm bows out of 10. You know, I watched this when I was older, so it didn't really spook me. But if I was a kid watching this, I would have been kind of scared of it. And especially the ending. The ending, I was a very paranoid kid. Hearing that laughter in the swing, that would have spooked me. It would have got me like, I wonder if my old swing set's haunted. Like, it would have put that thought bubble in there.
What scared Sue Ellen?
So Arthur tells about like fears and stuff, but basically this whole monologue that he's doing is supposed to say that like Sue Ellen isn't scared of anything. The episode starts with Binky telling a scary story to Arthur and Buster, and it spooks them, kind of. But Sue Ellen isn't fazed. She leaves them and goes off into the woods by herself, and she starts to hear like a howling noise and starts to get scared and paranoid. And honestly, same, because this is literally me like a month ago. I'm by myself. I'm very scared. Oh, and I recorded myself because I was scared like a panther or some cougar was gonna like come out and, I don't know, eat me? I don't know. Again, Sue Ellen gets really scared and runs off home. She starts to get paranoid that it was maybe Baba Yaga, not John Wick, the actual like story. She has a dream where she's in the woods and Baba Yaga is actually chasing after her. She wakes up and then Baba Yaga pops out in her window. That actually got me. She goes to school and she tells Binky, Buster, and Arthur about, what she thinks the thing was that howling. She tells about Baba Yaga. They all make fun of her. So she takes them to the actual woods and she starts telling other stories like the Kappa and the Banshee. And they actually show like a Kappa representation and a Banshee representation in the show. After she tells her stories, they all start to hear the howling and they get freaked out and they just run. But they all go home, but they're all so scared about everything that Sue Ellen was just like, you know what? We're going to stand up to it. And they dress up in protection gear, I guess. And they go over to where the howling was. And turns out it was a dog. The episode ends with Sue Ellen retelling the story, but amped it up, a little bit, trying to scare Francine and Brain. I give this episode 5 Baba Yagas out of 10. I know the paranormal doesn't really stay, because I absolutely love that. I was a paranoid kid, hearing about the Kappa, hearing about the Banshee, hearing about Baba Yaga. The fear of the unknown is what's scary to me. And I'm not gonna get too philosophical about that until the next video. So let's move on to the next ranking.
The Fright Stuff.
This is a classic episode, and this episode really made me scared of ghosts as a kid. We start off with an opening of Arthur talking about practical jokes and how they're really fun. After the bit, we see Brain, Arthur, Buster, and Binky get pranked. But with those pranks, they have like an invitation to go to the library and get pranked again by Muffy and Francine, basically telling them they're invited to a spooky party. But Muffy also warns the boys that she's gonna get them back for pranking her before, but they find out that the party's being held at the old manor, which is believed to be haunted. The boys try to cook up a plan to try to prank the girls, and while they're kind of scheming and planning, we cut to the girls actually practicing their plan. As they were talking, the lights turn off and on again. We then cut to the boys also practicing their prank, saying how they're gonna get them back. And then we cut to the party, which has like this rave music, which I never thought like a 3rd grade party would have. Arthur, Brain, and Buster are waiting for Binky to show up. Arthur tells him to go set up in the library. Then Arthur sees Binky and tells Binky to go up and set up. And the girls come in, and Arthur tries to lead them to the library. That's actually where the girls planned their prank to be at. As they enter the library, Francine turns off the lights, but Muffy can't find the balloons or the actual sound machine to scare Arthur. And then Binky shows up floating and then disappears, which scares the girls, not Arthur. The girls are kind of salty because that's where their plan was going to be at, and they think that the boys stole their prank. Arthur encourages them that they did not, and they tell the other boys to come out, and they don't. Buster and Brain come out in another room and tells Arthur to go into that one because the library was locked. And they actually found Francine's and Muffy's prank stuff, and which they're confused as to like, they didn't move it. And here's the kicker. Binky runs in, not in a pumpkin and sheet, but in a Cyclops costume because he broke his pumpkin. So everyone is just like, what the hell? Turn around. That pumpkin and sheet person is flying and flies over and scares them. And they all come running out to Muffy's dad. And Muffy's dad is lecturing about not to prank. But then we transition to the ghost family, the actual ghost family in the manor. And the ghost dad is like, oh, you shouldn't prank, blah, blah, blah. And then we go back to the kids basically being like, oh, okay, I'm never gonna prank ever again. And the end shot is the ghost family enjoying the party. I'm giving this episode 9 dark bunnies out of 10. Because 1, holy shit, and 2, they never bring this up again. And as a kid, I looked to Arthur as teaching me life lessons, a slice of life, something I can relate to. And them actually confirming that ghosts were real really scared the out of me. And I'm like, a paranoid kid, but I also grew up superstitious. My family believes in ghosts. And I know the ghosts were nice and stuff, but it still really scared me as a kid. And it's again, a classic episode where if you want to be in the spooky Halloween kind of vibe, especially with your kids, watch this episode.
Frankenstein's Monster.
This is going to be a controversial take because a lot of people, 1, don't remember this episode, and 2, don't really think it's the scariest thing out there. So the opening of the episode is basically Fern giving an oral report about Mary Shelley and how she strives to be like Mary Shelley. We cut to Muffy, Arthur, Buster, and Fern in the cafeteria during a thunderstorm, and they're all telling scary stories. And I would just want to say all the other kids' scary stories are like kid stories. They're not scary. They're not meant to be scary. They're supposed to amp up my girl Fern's story. I know I said I'm not gonna focus on like episodes that have like one-offs, but this story goes on for like 3 minutes. That's like a third of the episode runtime. But I can't do it justice. You just gotta watch it. And if I'm retelling the story, that means I got copyrighted, unfortunately. But please go check it out. She does it more justice than I'm gonna give it justice. So Fern starts off with a based on a true story kind of thing and tells about her uncle who studies bugs and insects.
That
That's not the scary part.
Exactly my reaction, Muffy. And they actually show Fern's uncle handling bugs and stuff, and it is the most creepiest looking thing I've ever seen. She goes on to tell about how her uncle is working with a professor, and the professor, you know, during another rainy, stormy day, just like the kids are at, needs an umbrella. And Fern's uncle finds an umbrella that was inside one of the boxes with an eye at the end, and it blinks. Fern's uncle, not fazed at all, gives the umbrella to the professor. And when the professor opens the umbrella, Fern describes like 1,000 stingers coming out, and the sounds of insects and wings is just coming at the professor. Thunderstorms are happening, a lightning strike happens, and then the professor was never seen again, kind of thing. The kids are scared. They run off. Fern calls him a scaredy cat. I love her. Anyways, basically throughout the whole episode, all the kids are scared of Fern, and they like repent her and stuff, and they're just like, stay away from me kind of thing. And it wasn't until they confront her exactly at the library's like free book event where they actually get scared because the lights go out when Fern like confronts them about it. But after the situation, Fern goes up to them and be like, hey, you know, stories are about, you know, imagination, so we can change the story how you like it. And it kind of goes downhill after that. The episode ends with DW coming up with even more grotesque and like scary like things to come up to make the story even more scary. And both of the kids are like trying to ignore what DW is saying. Before you judge me, before this rewatch, as a kid, I thought I like remembered actually seeing the stingers, seeing the wings and stuff. Turns out it wasn't, and my imagination as a kid came up with those details. Like, I was and still am so scared of bugs. And also, I will never forget the umbrella blinking, because that was so unnerving to me. I actually like stared at paintings and like also like fake eyes, like doll eyes and stuff, to see if they would actually blink, and they never did, thank God. I will always remember this episode, and I am completely biased, so you can judge me all you want or fight me in the comments. I don't care. It's my favorite episode. It's #1 and can get me into the spooky mood anytime. That's why I just love good storytelling, because it just can lead the imagination to come up with those details, and that's what I love about Fern. Fern can do no wrong. And to no surprise, I give this episode 10 eyeballs out of 10. Alright, so those are all the spooky episodes that I can find. If you have a spooky episode from Arthur that I missed, definitely leave it down in the comments. I definitely want to know more about it, especially the newer seasons, because I stopped watching it after maybe season 11-ish? Whenever we had to change like to HD TV. And I hope you enjoyed this nostalgic trip through Halloween episodes that may have scared you as a kid. Happy spooky season, and I'll see you later. Bye!